friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori. Today I'm super excited because I'm going to be doing a Q&A session with questions that you guys, the subscribers, have turned in for me to answer. The first thing I'm going to do is answer some questions from Twitter. I put out a post on my community tab here on the YouTube channel, and I also posted something on my Twitter. Let's get started. The first question we have is from my friend JCM Byrne, and this is obviously the most important question, which is why I'm starting with it. What is the secret to your youthful appearance? Is it supernatural? Funny story about that. So I was seen in an emergency room many years ago for something, and I actually had the doctor playing along with the idea that I was a vampire for a while, which was great fun. It's one of the best ER experiences that I've ever had, but he had a hard time finding my pulse, and I was lucid and talking, so he was a little confused. And yeah, I said, well, I mean, the truth is I am a vampire, and that's why. And he totally played along with it, and it was pretty great. So to answer your question, I can neither confirm nor deny the presence of supernatural anti-aging qualities. Now I have some questions from my friend John Morrow over at the Grimdark magazine. Shout out to John. John wants to know, could you tell us about your experiences as an author in your teenage years versus now as an adult? That's question number one. So this is a topic that honestly deserves its own video, and I am planning on doing one at some point. I'm kind of at a point in my life now where I'm ready to sort of start talking a little bit more about it in detail. The experiences that I had as a kid versus now as an adult. Obviously, I'm more self-driven now. I was making a lot of my own decisions then as well, but my parents obviously were very involved, and my mom was kind of acting as manager. 90% of what I did was in person, which is a huge difference between then and now, since a lot of my presence now is online. So it's having to learn a completely new style of marketing and all of the gadgets and gadgets that we didn't have 15 years ago when I started. Yeah, I think that's been a really big difference between the two, and also how I've grown from that 14-year-old girl who published and wrote books and was traveling and speaking and selling to now kind of opening a new chapter as a writer and seeing what I'm capable of now in an adult life without the kind of child author tag attached to it. The next question, also from John, you've been a huge proponent of mental health awareness. What do you see as the role of literature in helping to raise awareness and understanding of mental health issues? We read stories to connect with a broader view of humanity and things outside of ourselves, because we all live in a fairly limited sphere, right? And so reading allows us to travel beyond. And I think spending time very intimately with characters who deal with things that either we can relate to or we can learn to understand or just become aware of is really incredibly important. We always hear the term erase the stigma thrown around, but there's less talk about how we are actually doing that. There's, like, oh, let's erase the stigma, let's erase the stigma. And I think literature is a really big part of that. The stigma of people with mental illness being, that they can't have fulfilling lives or be great friends, great spouses, great parents, all of these different things. I mean, it's obviously different for every person, but there's so much that I think people in the general sense don't understand about what it's like to live with mental illness. And I always appreciate when something that I write or something that I read does a good job at maybe breaking down that barrier a little bit. Can reading or writing literature also be an effective form of therapy? Absolutely, yes. As I've talked about many times with Phased, I was in trauma therapy when I started writing it, and it became its own form of therapy for me as I went through the real life therapy. And the characters, worked through things. It was me processing a lot of things in a sense, which was incredibly helpful. Hopefully also something that other people who've been through similar or even different things in their lives can also relate to and feel encouraged by. So yeah, it's absolutely a form of therapy. Reading has been a form of therapy for me since I was a kid, and I honestly learned how to emotionally interact with and understand other people largely through the books that I was reading, and that was a huge, huge benefit to me as a kid. Now I have some questions from my good friend Kay at Kay's Hidden Shelf, whose channel will be linked below. Kay wants to know, how do I balance both booktube and writing and publishing? That is a great question that I really wish I had a good answer to. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend I have figured out this balance, you guys. It's nuts. Yeah, the balance between booktube and trying to get my book done and being a parent and being a wife and trying to somehow find time to like date my husband in here. For me at least, it's really easy to get hyper-focused because I have ADD, so I can like hyper-focus like nobody's business, and I can turn into a workaholic really easily. There's that perfectionist side of us, I think, that likes to beat ourselves up when we don't do all of the things that we're supposed to get done in our mental to-do list. And one of the things that a therapist of mine said that I have never forgotten, because it's one of my mantras in life now, is don't let your expectations steal your victories. Be really proud of the things that you've accomplished. Don't let all of the things you haven't done yet take away the accomplishment and the confidence, but I'm just going to take time to be in the moment and not beat myself up over what I haven't done yet. And that's something that I've worked really hard on because I'm horrible at that. And I've worked really hard on that. So that's one of the things that I try really hard to focus on. I don't know if that's a great answer to the question, but second question, what was your biggest learning curve with writing, either as a teenager or an adult? Honestly, my biggest learning curve was getting over myself. And what I mean by that is writing is a very vulnerable craft, and we get so sensitive, especially in early years, about people giving us critique or having to fix things or anything like that. The biggest hurdle that I see new writers struggle with, and I was guilty of it 100% the same way, was taking it all personally and not like asking for critique, but not really wanting to actually have constructive criticism. Now, there's a difference between actually constructive criticism and people just beating down on what you're doing. Those are not the same thing. But good constructive criticism coming from people that you have let in and trust, that's invaluable. And I would really encourage any newer writers not to shy away from that. I know it's hard. I know it hurts when somebody comes back and says, I might need to fix this. But at the end, what that's going to do is it's going to speed up your growth process. You're going to learn new things. You're going to see things in your stories that you would not have seen without those outside eyes. Last but not least, what is my secret to networking? Also a topic that I plan on doing an entire video on, because I get asked questions about networking all the time. I have been an entrepreneur since I was 14 years old. I've owned 5 small businesses since then. I think the biggest thing that I always focus on is relationships before business. And what I mean by that is when you're trying to reach out and network, even if you're coming at it from, I want to sell books, or I want to, whatever it is, build the relationship first. Don't just go into it and say, I'm going to get to know this person so that they will review my book or buy my book or whatever. Spend time in the community. Get to know the people in the community. Make relationships. Make friends. Start a village, don't look at it from a numbers and business side of things, because it will never ever get you as far personally as you will if you focus on building those relationships. It's amazing the doors that open when you work on that. Next up is from my friend Esme. Shout out to Esme. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be? My boring answer to this question is probably where I live now. I have never been outside the US, which is a horrible, awful thing, and I desperately want to remedy that because there's so many amazing places in the world that I want to travel and see and experience. So I'm gonna give you my like top travel destinations. I really desperately want to see Norway because that's a place that has a lot of family heritage for me. Japan is another place that I really want to visit. South Korea is another place I really want to visit. Someday I would absolutely love to see some of the Mayan and Incan archaeology sites like Machu Picchu, etc., down in South America. All of the things, like there's so many places that I want to visit. Also, a lot of people don't really get what's in the Midwest in Minnesota. And my favorite place on earth is the North Shore in Minnesota. It is the most beautiful place I have ever seen. And that's my heart place, and it's the place that I wish I could go all the time. And next from Esme, what is your favorite thing about being a relatively young mom? I will be 39 years old when my son graduates high school, which is kind of insane. And I love that I'm, in a sense, there's a little bit of me growing up with them still, which has been really lovely in some ways. Sometimes it's been a challenge also in others. I would say the energy level, but I have chronic adrenal fatigue, so I don't really know that I have a ton of like boost in that area. I love seeing their imagination and their enthusiasm about the world and being able to be a part of it. I don't know that that would be any different with a parent who is older than I am now. But being really young when my kids are graduating and moving out and having their own families is definitely something that I think will be a great perk for us. Last but not least from Esme, would you rather spend a day with your favorite SFF character or with your favorite author? That is a great question. I mean, I did have the honor of having a conversation with one of my writing heroes, Stephen Erickson, which I will put up in the cards so you guys can watch that conversation. It was amazing. Probably my favorite SFF authors because I want to learn from them, and I would love to get a chance to just spend a day with them and just talk about books and writing and things, and I just think that would be an awesome learning experience. So I'm probably going to go with authors. Chris, my friend Chris over at Chris Reads Books, wants to know, how much pre-writing work do you put into a project before you start typing? World building, outlining, character bios, etc. Do you leave a lot of room for discovery? So I do have a general idea of where I'm going. I usually have an idea of, here's what I want to end with. Here's this big ending I'm building towards. Here's this big ending that I'm building towards, and here are these like really big moments that I want to hit on during the series or the book. I'm definitely a discovery writer, so I leave myself a lot of flexibility space because I'm the type of person that if I wrote it all out chapter by chapter, beat by beat, like every little moment throughout the book, I would get so bored. That's just an experience that I've had. I have lots of friends who are much more intense planners than I am, and it works incredibly well for them. So I really think it depends on the person you are, but for me specifically, discovery writing is where it's at. Pippin, quit! No, you don't need to open the door. Now I'm going to be grabbing up my phone so that I can answer the questions from the community tab on YouTube. Mr. Sosotris reads, apologies if I don't pronounce some of these correctly. Which authors that your younger self didn't give much thought to are you glad you reevaluated and now love? I don't know if I can name a particular author, but one of the things that I know I have definitely grown as a reader in is my ability to appreciate the more detailed books that are a little bit more of a slow burn. Slow burn was something that I never really enjoyed reading when I was younger. I wanted a lot of action, I wanted fast-paced, and I wanted high stakes all the time. A great example of this would probably be Robin Hobb, actually. I read the Farseer trilogy and enjoyed it, but I think after having watched so much of the content surrounding her books here on our fantasy community, I have a new appreciation, I think, for the slow burn and the relationship building that she does, because I loved it before, but I feel like I really have more of a respect for it now than I used to. Ty, new booktuber, go check him out in the comments, wants to know, what author inspired you the most during your childhood? To be perfectly honest, the author that I have to call out for this is Jack London with White Fang. What I loved so much about White Fang, and I do intend to reread it at some point and do an in-depth review of it, what always really struck me about that book was White Fang's character was so incredibly powerful, and he never speaks. It's all told from his perspective, so it's a very unique view on the world. I resonated, I think, with a lot of the healing from trauma themes that were in White Fang, even at that young age, and that's been something that has really stuck with me throughout the years. And I know Call of the Wild is always the Jack London book that everybody goes gaga over, but honestly, in my opinion, White Fang is the far superior of the two. I like Call of the Wild, but White Fang is so good. Christopher Navo, another new booktuber, go check him out in the comments. Do you write in continuous chapters, pages, or if an idea for a scene later in your novel comes to mind, do you skip and write that portion? So one of the things that I've had to learn with ADD and writing and trying to stay organized, for me, is I have to keep it in sequential order because I have a harder time with sequential processing. If I get things out of order, I get very lost very quickly. For me, surprisingly, I actually write pretty chronologically. Like, I may do a little bit of a paragraph sketch or some notes or something to have on the side for when I get to a scene later. But generally speaking, I stay pretty chronological with my books, and that really helps me with the linear processing of the storyline so that I'm not, okay, what was happening? Does this even remotely flow well? So that is just a thing that works well for me, and writing chronologically helps me keep this brain somewhat organized. Sam M wants to know what books have changed you most as a person. Honestly, I don't know. This is a really hard question for me to answer, and I'm not really sure why. Memoirs are ones that I really love reading stories of overcomers. I really appreciate those kind of stories, and those are the ones that really gave me a boost, I think. I have to give a shout out to Dead House Gates here, to be honest, because I read Dead House Gates in a very formative time during college where I had a lot of stuff resurfacing and I was dealing with a lot of things. I read Dead House at the exact time I needed it, and it completely changed my perspective on so many things, and it kind of unlocked, I think, a part of me that I was in denial about. And it also changed me as a writer at the same time, because it completely opened my mind to what was possible and what fantasy could look like and what fantasy characters could look like, and how that emotive strength coming off those pages can be such a huge impact to the reader. And then last but not least, ZK wants to know, how has travel benefited your writing? And like I mentioned before, unfortunately, I haven't been able to jump out of the United States yet to see other places, which I really want to do. I would say in general, though, just a chance to see how both the diversity and the similarity of people in general, and that's been something that's been really cool. Getting a chance to experience something from someone else's perspective really helps me as a writer, because I can't possibly experience everything in life. There's no way. Getting a chance to hear someone else's story and just kind of sponge that in, and then it just broadens the what I'm able to write about. Also, it helps with environments. Anyways, I've been rambling for a really long time. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that you enjoyed the answers to your questions. Feel free to leave any other ones down in the comments below if you missed out. If you want to check out my Patreon, in the description box below, I have an exclusive Discord. I have more kind of behind the scenes about my writing. I hope you guys are having a fantastic week. I hope you are reading 5-star reads, and I will see you in the next video.